Without me, you would be nothing!
In one of New York's most expensive restaurants, a humble man witnesses something that makes his blood boil. A millionaire publicly humiliates his girlfriend in front of everyone, treating her like a disposable object. Unable to accept this injustice, he does something unexpected. He approaches her and offers help. What begins as an act of courage transforms into a journey of faith, redemption, and true love. The young woman trapped in a golden cage will discover that there is something far more valuable than money. And when the former millionaire tries to win her back, she teaches him a lesson that will send chills down your spine. You won't believe how this story ends. So subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and comment on where you're watching from, and let's get to the story. It was a cold Friday in November in Manhattan, the kind of cold that cuts to the skin, you know. That icy wind that rises from the Hudson River and seems to pierce through any coat. On the corner of 5th Avenue and 57th Street, the Le Bernardin restaurant shone like a jewel in the middle of the night. Warm lights, impeccable windows, and outside, a line of imported cars dropping off well-dressed people at the door. David Mitchell was 28 years old, with calm brown eyes and a smile that conveyed peace. He worked as a carpenter and that night was returning from a job in an apartment on the Upper East Side. He wore faded jeans, work boots, and a simple flannel jacket under his coat. He wasn't the type of guy who frequented places like that, but he was hungry, and he had just received his paycheck for a whole week of hard work. He thought, why not? I'll grab a decent coffee and something to eat. When he entered the restaurant, he felt everyone's eyes on him. The maitre d', a man in an impeccable suit with a haughty air, looked him up and down as if David had entered the wrong place. But David wasn't fazed. He politely asked for a table at the counter, near the kitchen, and was led there with some reluctance. He didn't care. He knew who he was. He knew his worth. He sat down, ordered a coffee and a sandwich, the cheapest option on the menu, and remained there, calmly observing the activity. The place was too elegant. Crystals, fine porcelain plates, waiters who seemed to dance among the tables, everything perfectly orchestrated. But something caught his attention. 3 tables ahead, near the window overlooking the illuminated avenue, sat a couple. He, a man in his early 40s, with perfectly cut gray hair, an Armani suit, a watch gleaming on his wrist, probably worth more than David's car. And she was young, probably about 25, blonde, in an elegant navy blue dress, but her face told a different story. Her eyes were red. She looked down, nervously fidgeting with her napkin, while he spoke, and he spoke loudly. Do you think I don't notice? The man's voice cut through the air like a knife. Do you think I'm an idiot, Madison? I give you everything, everything, and you can't even give me basic attention when I talk to you. Madison. That was her name. She didn't answer. She just shrugged, her eyes fixed on the untouched plate in front of her. Look at me when I'm talking to you, he ordered, and some people at nearby tables began to discreetly glance. Madison slowly raised her face, and David saw. He saw the humiliation, the pain, the fear. She was trapped, not physically, but emotionally, completely trapped. The man continued, now with a cruel smile on his lips. You know what your problem is, Madison. You forget where I took you from. You forget that without me you would be nothing, absolutely nothing. You'd be waiting tables somewhere like this or worse. David felt a tightening in his chest. He knew this type of man. He'd seen it before. People who used money as a weapon, as a means of control. He tried to refocus his attention on his coffee, but he couldn't. The man's voice continued. Do you think anyone else would want you? Look at you. Beautiful, yes, but stupid. Really uneducated. No future. I am your future, darling. Never forget that. That's when Madison started to cry. Quietly, trying to hide her face with her hands. And the man, he laughed. He really laughed. He picked up his cell phone and started typing something, completely ignoring her tears. David couldn't take it anymore. He put his coffee cup down on the table, took a deep breath, and stood up. He knew he shouldn't interfere. It wasn't his problem. But something inside him, that calm voice that always guided him, that certainty that God placed him in the right places at the right times, pushed him forward. She walked over to their table. The man didn't even look up, but Madison did. She looked up, her red, frightened eyes wide, and David offered her the kindest smile he could muster. "Excuse me for interrupting," David said, his voice firm but respectful, "but I just wanted to make sure everything is all right here." The man finally looked up, frowning. "Who the hell are you?" "I was just there and, well, I couldn't help but notice that you seemed to need help." David looked at Madison. "Are you all right, miss?" "She's fine," the man interrupted, his voice full of contempt. "And that's none of your business. Go back to your seat before I call security." David didn't move. He kept looking at Madison. "I know you don't know me, but if you need help getting out of here, or just want to talk, I'm here. Nobody deserves to be treated like this." Madison opened her mouth, but the man slammed his hand on the table. "That's enough. Get out of here now, you stinking Carpenter. You think you can come here and lecture me? I pay more in taxes in a month than you earn in a year." Some people started whispering. David took a deep breath. "Money doesn't give you the right to humiliate anyone, sir, and it definitely doesn't make you better than anyone else." The man stood up, red with anger, but at that moment Madison stood up too. She was trembling, but there was something different in her eyes. A spark, a decision. I need to go to the bathroom," she said, her voice weak. And then she looked at David. Could you wait for me near the exit?" David nodded. "Sure." "Madison, sit here now," the man ordered, but she was already walking quickly toward the restrooms at the back of the restaurant. The man looked at David with pure hatred. "If you talk to her, I'll finish you off. Understand?" David didn't answer. He simply went back to the counter, grabbed his coat, and waited near the entrance, as he had promised. His heart was pounding. He didn't know what was going to happen. He only knew that he had done the right thing. 10 minutes later, Madison emerged from the bathroom. Her boyfriend was on the phone, yelling at someone, his back to her. She quickly grabbed her purse and walked straight for the door. David followed. When they both stepped out onto the freezing street, she stopped, trembling, not just from the cold, but from fear, adrenaline, and liberation. I don't know what I just did," she whispered, hugging herself. "He's going to be furious." "You did what you needed to do," David said calmly. "You're safe now." Madison looked at him, really looked. "Why did you do this? Why did you interfere?" David shrugged. "Because it was the right thing to do, and because nobody deserves to be treated that way. Nobody." She started crying again, but this time it was different. It was relief. It was freedom. David took off his own scarf and put it on her shoulders. "Come on. There's a coffee shop on the corner. Let's have a hot coffee and talk if you want." Madison hesitated for only a second before nodding. And there, on that cold November night, under the lights of New York, began a story that would change two lives forever. The coffee shop was small and cozy, the kind of place that seemed to embrace whoever entered. Yellowish lights, the smell of fresh coffee and cinnamon, wooden tables worn by time. Madison and David sat in a corner, away from the window. She was still trembling, holding the mug of hot chocolate in her hands, as if it were the only solid thing in the world. "I don't even know where to begin," she said finally, her voice weak. "You must think I'm pathetic." "I don't think any of that," David replied honestly. "I just think you were stuck in a difficult situation. It happens to a lot of people." Madison let out a bitter laugh. "Difficult? It's worse than that. You know, I met Richard 2 years ago. He seemed so perfect, you know? Rich, confident, charming. He took me to dinner at expensive places, showered me with gifts, made me feel special. I came from a poor family in Staten Island. My mother worked as a cleaning lady. We could barely pay the rent, and suddenly this man shows up saying I'm the most beautiful woman he's ever seen, that he wants to give me the world. She paused, wiping away a tear that ran down her face. At first it was incredible. He moved me into a fancy apartment in Tribeca. He gave me a credit card with no limit. Designer clothes, dinners, trips. It was like a fairy tale, you know? But little by little, he started to change. David listened in silence and without interrupting, just listening. He started controlling me. He wanted to know where I was all the time, who I was talking to, what I was wearing. He said it was because he loved me, that he wanted to protect me. But it was control, pure control. And when I questioned him, he would get furious. He would remind me of everything he did for me. He made me feel small, worthless, as if I owed him everything, as if I didn't have the right to complain because he paid my bills. This isn't love, David said softly. Love doesn't control. Love doesn't humiliate. Love liberates. Madison looked at him, surprised. How do you know that? David gave a small smile. I learned it in church, from people who truly taught me what it means to love for real. And I learned it from God. He never controlled me, never humiliated me. Even when I make mistakes, he lifts me up. He shows me that I have value, not because of what I have or do, but because of who I am. God, Madison repeated, almost whispering. I never really had much religion, you know. My family didn't go to church, and Richard always said religion was for weak people, people who need crutches. He's wrong, David said firmly. Faith isn't a crutch. It's a foundation. It's what holds you up when everything falls apart. It's what reminds you that you're worth more than any bank account, more than any toxic relationship, more than anything material. You were created in God's image, Madison. That means you have dignity. You have value. And nobody can take that away from you. She remained silent for a long moment, staring at the cup. Then she looked up, and there was something different there, a curiosity, a small hope. Do you really believe that? She asked. With every fiber of my being, David replied. And if you want, I can show you. There's a church I go to here in Manhattan. It's nothing fancy, you know? It's simple, but the people there are real. They're good, and I think you'd like it. Madison hesitated. I don't know. I've never really been to church in my life. You don't need to know anything. You just need to show up, and I'll be there with you if you want. No pressure, no obligation. Just a chance to see something different. She nodded slowly. Okay, I'll go, but I have to go back to the apartment. Get my things. Richard must be calling me nonstop. David took a pen and wrote the church's address on a napkin. Sunday, 10 in the morning. If you need anything before then, my number is below. You can call me anytime, okay? Madison took the napkin as if it were a treasure. Thank you. Really. You don't know me, but you saved me today. It wasn't me, David said with a smile. I think it was God putting us in the same place at the right time. They left the coffee shop together. David hailed a taxi for her and waited until the car disappeared into the night. Then he walked to the subway, his heart full of hope and a silent prayer on his lips. Lord, protect her and show her how much she's worth. Sunday arrived with a clear blue sky, a rare sight for New York. David was in front of the church at 9:30, a little nervous, watching the street. He didn't know if Madison would show up, but at 10 o'clock sharp, he saw her. She was walking slowly, wearing a simple sweater and jeans, no makeup, her hair tied in a ponytail. She looked different, younger, more real. You came, David said, smiling broadly. I said I'd come, she replied nervously. But I'm terrified. There's no need to be afraid. Come." They entered together. The church was small but full of light. The walls were white, the pews simple wood, and the people were of all kinds. Young, old, families, singles, all smiling, greeting each other. An elderly lady, with white hair and kind eyes, came up to Madison and hugged her as if they were old friends. "Welcome, dear. Is this your first time here?" Madison, surprised, nodded. "Yes, it is. You're going to love it. Make yourself at home, and if you need anything, we're here." During the service, Madison remained quiet, but David noticed. He noticed the tears she tried to hide when the pastor spoke about God's unconditional love. He noticed how she closed her eyes during the worship, as if she were drinking in every word. When the pastor made the appeal, inviting anyone who wanted to accept Jesus, Madison looked at David. He simply smiled and nodded, as if to say, "Go, if you feel it's the right time." And she went. With trembling but determined steps, she went to the front and knelt. There, surrounded by people she barely knew but who welcomed her with love, Madison surrendered her life to Christ. She cried out everything she had kept inside, all the pain, all the shame, all the fear, and he felt, for the first time in years, peace. When she returned to the bench, David simply held her hand and whispered, "Welcome home." In the weeks that followed, Madison began attending church regularly. David introduced her to the youth group and she made real friends. Friends who cared about her, not what she wore or where she lived. She began studying the Bible, asking questions, and growing. And slowly, she broke free from the emotional chains that Richard had placed on her. She moved her too. She rented a small apartment in the Bronx, nothing luxurious, but it was hers. She got a job at a bookstore, and she loved it. For the first time in her life, she was building something of her own. But Richard didn't give up easily. 3 months after that night at the restaurant, Madison was unrecognizable. Not in appearance, she was still beautiful, but in her essence. She had a light in her eyes. She smiled genuinely. She laughed easily. And her friendship with David had grown in a natural and beautiful way. They would have coffee together after church. They would talk for hours about faith, about dreams, about life. David taught her carpentry on Saturdays, and she would laugh at her own clumsy attempts to hammer a straight nail. It was simple, it was real, and it was happy. But one day, everything changed. Madison was working at the bookstore when Richard walked in. He looked impeccable as always, expensive suit, perfect hair, that confident smile. She felt her stomach drop. "Madison," he said, his voice too soft. "Can we talk?" "We have nothing to talk about, Richard. Please, just 5 minutes. I came all the way here to apologize." She hesitated, but something inside her, perhaps newfound faith, perhaps newfound strength, made her accept. They went out onto the sidewalk. The afternoon sun beat down brightly, and New York was a chaotic mix of honking horns and rushing people. "I messed up," Richard began, and he even seemed sincere. "I know I messed up. I treated you badly, and you didn't deserve it. But I've changed, Madison. These months without you have been hell. I realized how much you mean to me." "Richard, wait, let me finish. I know you're with this Carpenter now, this David. And look, I respect that. But Madison, think about it. What can he give you? A tiny apartment? A job in a bookstore? You deserve more than that. You deserve the life I can give you. Travel, comfort, security, everything." Madison looked at him, and for the first time, she saw clearly. She saw the manipulation. She saw the selfishness. She saw a man who didn't love her. He loved to possess her. "You still don't understand, do you?" she said calmly. This was never about money, Richard. Do you think I traded you for David because he's poor? Do you think I don't realize he has so much more than you could ever have?" Richard frowned. What are you talking about? He has kindness. He has faith. He has a heart that cares about others. He looks at me as if I were valuable, not as if I were property. He taught me about God, about respect, about true love. And you know what I discovered? I discovered that I don't need imported cars to be happy. I don't need fancy apartments. I need peace, love, to be seen as a human being, not as a trophy. Madison, you're being dramatic. No, Richard, I'm being honest for the first time in my life. You offered me the world, but you forgot to offer me the most important thing, respect. And you know what's funny? David never promised me wealth. He never promised me luxury, but he gave me dignity. He gave me hope. He introduced me to a God who truly loves me, unconditionally, and that's worth more than any bank account. Richard began to blush. You'll regret this. When you're living in misery, eating instant noodles every day, you'll remember me and realize you threw it all away. Madison smiled, a sad but firm smile. Do you know the difference between you and me, Richard? You think wealth is money. I've learned that wealth is peace. It's waking up without fear. It's having people around you who truly love you. It's having faith in something greater than yourself. That's wealth, and in that sense, I'm the richest person you'll ever meet. She turned her back and went back to the bookstore, leaving Richard standing on the sidewalk, stunned. And for the first time, he realized he had truly lost her. Not to the Carpenter, but to a version of her he had never known. A free version. 6 months later, on a spring afternoon filled with flowers and blue skies, David and Madison were walking through Central Park. They had spent the day helping at church, serving food to homeless people, and were tired but happy. You know, Madison said, stopping near the lake, I never imagined my life could be like this. Like what? David asked, smiling. Happy, truly happy, without needing anything artificial, you know? Just peace, love, purpose. David gently took her hand. You deserve all this and more. She looked at him, and her eyes filled with tears, but they were good tears. I love you, David, not because of what you have or what you give me. I love you for who you are, for how you see me, for how you taught me to see myself. I love you too, he said, pulling her close. And I promise I'll spend the rest of my life showing you how much you're worth. They kissed there, under the flowering trees, with the sounds of birds and children playing in the background. And it was perfect. Not because it was cinematic, but because it was real. 2 years later, they married in a simple ceremony at the same church where Madison had met Jesus. There was no ostentation, no luxury, but there was love. There was family, both hers and his. They were true friends, and there was God at the center of everything. Madison wore a simple dress she had chosen herself, without an unlimited credit card, and she had never felt so beautiful. David, in a rented suit, looked nervous. His eyes filled with tears when he saw her walk in. And when the pastor asked if they promised to love, respect, and honor one another, they both said yes, with a certainty that came from the depths of their souls. They built a life together. It wasn't a life of luxury. They lived in a small apartment in Queens. They worked hard. Sometimes money was tight, but every night they had dinner together. They talked, they laughed, they prayed, and through every difficulty, they supported each other, because they knew what truly mattered. Years later, as Madison held her newborn daughter in her arms, a little girl with big eyes and rosy cheeks, she looked at David, who was beside her holding her hand, and whispered, "We did it. We built something real." David kissed her forehead. "And it's going to get better and better, because everything we have is based on the only foundation that never crumbles." "Which one?" she asked, even though she knew the answer. "True love, faith, and the grace of God." And in that simple hospital room, without luxury, without ostentation, just a family of three embracing and grateful, Madison realized she had found true wealth. and it wasn't worth millions. It couldn't be bought or sold, but it was worth everything. Absolutely everything. Because in the end, what remains isn't the money in the bank account. It's not the car you drive or the restaurant you frequent. What remains is the love you gave, the lives you touched, the faith you carried, and the people who stayed by your side not because you had something to offer, but because you were enough. Exactly as you were. Madison had learned this the hard way, but also the most beautiful way. And she wouldn't trade this journey for anything in the world. Madison's story teaches us something the world has forgotten. True wealth lies not in the things we accumulate, but in the people we love and the faith we carry. David didn't have a fortune, but he had something money can never buy, a generous heart and unwavering faith. And that's what freed Madison from the invisible chains that bound her. Today, wherever she is, Madison knows her worth doesn't come from a bank account, but from who she is in God's eyes. And that's something no one can take away. If this story touched you, leave a like, comment what you thought, and subscribe to keep hearing stories like this. Until next time.